To our knowledge, good governance and political stability are fundamental to fostering inclusive development, strengthening institutions, and ensuring sustainable progress. This session will explore the challenges and opportunities in promoting effective governance, accountability, and political resilience in an increasingly interconnected world. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to invite all our distinguished moderator and esteem. This session will be led by Tan Sri Dato Dr. Johari Abdul, and the moderator for this session will be Professor Dr. KHAIRUDIN ALJUNIED. I now have the honor to invite the moderator to take over the proceeding. Thank you.
As-Salamu alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salamu ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursaleen wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Thank you once again, everyone, for making your time to come for the second day of this conference. Today we are going to have a very interesting session. I think it's an issue that has been on the minds of not only Malaysians, but also Muslims and non-Muslims from all over the world. We're going to look at good governance and political stability in the Muslim world. Before I begin with our four speakers, our four notable speakers, maybe I want to give a bit of so-called overview about what's happening right now in the Muslim world. Not something that is exhaustive. We know that in the Muslim world consists of 50 member states, over 1.9 billion people all over the world. But if you look at indicators, for example, the indexes such as the Corruption Perception Index, the Democracy Index, the Global Peace Index, and all the kinds of indices that you see out there, the Muslim world is not in a good state. Many of these indexes show that out of 50 Muslim majority countries, only 2, Indonesia and Malaysia, actually qualify as some sort of what they call as flawed democracies. Generally, many countries all over the Muslim world are seen as countries that are stable but not having the kind of democratic values that they ought to have. So what we want to do today is to explore some of the reasons why the Muslim world have gotten to the state that it is in today. But more importantly, I think we want to do something more aspirational, to think of the various steps that we need to take in order to propel the Muslim world forward in terms of governance and political stability. Now, the panelists that we have today are people who come from different parts of the Muslim world. So they're going to give you perspectives from various aspects of governance in the Muslim world, but more importantly, various steps that we're going to take moving forward. We're going to begin by someone that I'm sure everyone here is familiar with. He's actually a celebrity on TikTok, ironically. Tan Sri Dato Johari Abdul is the Speaker of the House of Representatives. I was just joking with him last night. My first encounter with him was him shouting in Parliament, and it's a remarkable sight. But what we want to hear from him today is what does he think about the future of Malaysia in terms of governance and the current state of Malaysia as against his own experiences and reflections. Tan Sri Johari.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Mr. Moderator, may I be permitted to be here rather than there? I was a politician. When politicians speak, he cannot sit down, he must stand up. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, Professor KHAIRUDIN ALJUNIED, the distinguished speakers after me after this, Mr. Speaker of State of Perak, and fellow friends, Alhamdulillah, thank you for inviting me to share some of the experiences that I do have with friends here when we talk about these very heavy topics was given to me to discuss on good governance and political stability. Let me explain who I am first, because then you understand how I behave matches whatever my experience are. Well, thank God I had good exposure because I was educated here in Malaysia. I had that opportunity of studying in local university, and I had opportunity of studying overseas in England. Then I started my career as a banker. Upon graduation, I started as a banker, then I left this banking service to join the local government. Then I was a Dewan Bandaraya officer. So from banking, you move to local government. Then from there, I left Dewan Bandaraya to join PTD, diplomatic service, where I served in a few departments in Malaysia, and also I was education attaché in our Malaysian consulate in Los Angeles. Then I left the service to join corporate world, and I was at a managerial level in corporate world, developing Langkawi for quite some time. Then I left the corporate world to join politics. I was a member of parliament for 3 terms, representing Sungai Petani, and also an ADUN in Gurun for a term. And I was a opposition leader in Kedah, when BN is the government. And I was a chief whip of opposition parties in parliament. And today I'm the speaker. Now, having said that, you have collected experiences from various sectors. Then when MPs were debating things, I could imagine what is in his mind, because I was there. And some of the MPs don't even know what the hell they are talking about. Because some MPs just don't get them prepared. Because in Malaysia, we have cameras all over the chamber. And the debates are made live. So some of the MPs just behave as if you're a hero that day, and you want your people in your constituency see that you speak on certain issues. And that's why they behave that way. Nevertheless, what is important, the issue that we are talking today is about the governance and the political stability. When we were the chairman of ASEAN last year, and I was the president of IPA, the ASEAN Interparliamentary Assembly, I had the opportunity of meeting a lot of business community and political leaders all over ASEAN, and some invited guests from some other parts of the world. And when you talk to the corporate leaders who came and invest here very heavily, I do ask them why Malaysia not other countries? Why Malaysia, not A, B, C countries? I can summarize the answers at, these are the things that they said to me. Number one is about political stability. They could see from a distance where we do change government and prime ministers. We used to have a government who rules for almost 60 years in Malaysia. Then after that, we have change of prime ministers. And of course, some are 9 years, some are just few months, and whatever it is. But the country is very stable, meaning to say that there is change of government or change of prime minister, but there's no bloodshed on the street. People don't go riot and burning things and burning houses. And there are countries that people go and burn their parliament houses. But it doesn't happen in Malaysia. That's number one. Number two is about tolerance level. It's very high. We have Muslims who live next to churches, temples, Hindu temples, and Buddhist temples. And we have non-Muslims who live next to mosques. And we call for a 5-time azan. And sometimes the mosque caretaker will put volume to the highest, to the max, even 5 or 10 minutes before azan in subuh. People don't complain. People don't go and burn their mosque. And there are Hindu temples who start ringing the bell at 7 o'clock in the afternoon, in the evening, and burning all kind of scents. Nobody complain and burn the temples. Meaning to say that our tolerance level is very high. And number three is about our education system. I mean, I was once education attaché in America. I could see. When I was the person that get involved in sending students all over the world, probably in 1980s and 90s, we do not have students in Israel. Other than that, even we do have students in Alaska, in Africa. We do have students in Europe. We do have students in Middle East. So when they come back, it's an amalgamation of good experiences where students pick up all these experiences from all over the world. And that helps. Now, having said that, the investors would want to come to a country that they feel good when they invest billions of dollars in this country and they know that policy will continue, even though there's a change of government or change of prime minister. Now the question next should be asked, will we continue this kind of environment? Looking at what's happening today, this is new dimension altogether. We used to have general election runs concurrently with state election. Suddenly we have different phenomenon now. State election happened before even general election. We had in Johor, we had now in Negeri Sembilan, and probably next, we never know. And you have, very interestingly, some states have coalition government among few parties, and they are opposition with other parties. But when it comes to federal, this opposition become your governing parties that in the government. So this is dynamic that we're going through. A party that is a member of your coalition at federal level is an opposition at a state level. And yet, the country grew. We are friends. I might shout at you at state level. When I come back to federal, we are friends. And you are my boss. I'm your subordinate. This is something that is very interesting. So those who are thinking of writing a PhD on this, please do. Now, this is Malaysian way of doing things. We have differences, and I could see that in Parliament. People shout at each other, then after that, they show sign, let's go out and drink. They'll be quarreling, yelling, and 3 minutes later, they go and see same table and drinking coffee together. And you guys outside there thought they are fighting like hell. No, they are not. Some are just for show. But the point I'm trying to arrive at here is that, will that situation stay? And is the first past the post, the system that we are experiencing, that we are practicing today, will be a good system and that allows us to be what we are today in future. And that is my concern. That's why I introduced, when I became the speaker, I had this in mind, that we should have a school, an institution that teach young people how to be leaders of the nation. Because at the moment, these preparing leaders and teaching leaders how to be leaders are left to the political parties. The training are done by them. And what more, the education system in Malaysia allows us that all institutions can run concurrently as long as you follow the guidelines by the Ministry of Education. As long as you are licensed to run your school, you're allowed. That's why we have Mahatafis, religious school. We have Vernacular language school. We have Tamil school. We have Chinese school. We have missionary school. We have Sekolah Kebangsaan, national school. We have international school. And we have various schools that run concurrently. And the students will meet at the university when they got their SPM. And if you were to look at the religious school, Mahatafis, they are Mudir from India, they are Mudir from Pakistan, they are Mudir from Lebanon, they are Mudir from Syria, they are Mudir from Egypt. So everybody will have their own experience differently, even though they are from Mahatafis. Suddenly, they are assembled at the university after Form 5, taking all kinds of courses. And as a political leader, you hope that these groups of students would be your future leaders when they have different experiences and belief. Years from education, their own education background. That is the danger that's coming. That's why I introduced these 3 steps, and I want it to be continuous. Number 1, I introduced Sekolah Parliament, whereby every session we will have students from all over Malaysia. Head boys and head girls are organized for a short tour into Parliament. And their ages, probably 16 to 17, they are head boys and head girls. And I want them to understand what Parliament is all about and what democracy is all about. Because democracy is not dead. Democracy is alive. Because I even allow them to be in the chamber and listen to the debates, what's going on in the chambers. And give them some ideas that this is what democracy is all about. And I told them, this is Parliament. Parliament is house their democracy. It's not House of Brahmin, no more. It used to be House of Brahmin. Only Brahmin can be there. Not even the proletariat can be there now. That's number one. But number two, we also get involved in PLKM, Program Latihan Khidmat Negara. Because, as I said, their students come from various backgrounds. There are students from Mahat Tafiz, there are students from Indian Oriental Language School, Chinese, Tamil, international school, whatever it is. But immediately after your SPM, 45 days you will spend in military camps. This is where you need to know who are your neighbors. You need to know who are other Malaysians than you. There are Malays, Indians, Chinese, Sadan, Kadaban, orang asli, and so we amalgamate them. We put them in one camp. At the moment, there are about 5 camps now, and each intake, there are 250 of them. And we teach them to be leaders, not to be military officers. How to behave like a leader. We want them to be a leader. And 45 days, you got to understand your neighbors. You got to appreciate who they are. And of course, we teach you how to handle guns, just to excite you. And the third program we have is Parliament Belia, whereby in this Parliament Belia, youth from 18 to 30 will be able to stand for the election of Parliament Belia. And we will not use, and we are not using, the first past the post system no more. We are using proportional representation. Meaning to say that we learn and we teach you how even to form a party. There must be 8 members to form a party. Then you have to go and find 250 members in order to qualify you to stand for election. What does he mean by proportional representation? Meaning to say that how many percent of the votes that you get in a state to allow you to send your member of parliament. Your party would contest. It's not you. It's not individual no more. Proportional representation means to say you should portray who you are in terms of your party. So if your party ABC win big, then depends on how many percent of the entire 222, because we put exactly as a mirror image of what is happening in the real parliament. Now, Parliament Belia would have 222 MPs, and they come from various parties. And when the party wins, it is a party that selects the best person to be sent as their member of parliament. So the members do not contest. It is a party that contests. So you must put all your energy, your money, and your time to promote your party. Tell the world what is your party, what is your manifesto, and the faces must be Malaysian faces. And you put what kind, how many percent female and gender sensitivity. What are the things that you are fighting for? Then people will look into your party. My friends, we do this because we know in order to have stability in this country, we have to nurture the future leadership. There's no two way about it. You can't live without planning, because if you don't plan, you plan to fail. Definitely. You have to plan, because if you don't plan, you plan to fail. So my responsibility as a speaker, not only that I manage the everyday things what's happening in parliament, but to think of the future. Because politicians think about next election. But leaders think about next generation. We must be leaders. You must think about next generation. What's going to happen? Because the multiplying effect of what is happening in Malaysia is enormous and very scary. I can go on for another 2 hours, but the moderator has shown me the sign. Thank you very much. I hope to see you again.
Okay. Thank you very much, Tan Sri. He is the Speaker of Parliament, but today I will exercise my prerogative as the moderator of the session. I was afraid to tell him to stop because he will tell me to stop. But I think please reserve your comments for Tan Sri. I spoke to him last night and I said to him, there will be hundreds of questions that will be thrown to him later on. We will limit it to a few. But we're going to move on from what Tan Sri has spoken about just now on creating a new political reality in Malaysia to looking at the Middle East. So we have now with us Professor Joseph MASSAD, who will share with us the situation in the Middle East and also issues on security and how it relates to governance. Professor Joseph MASSAD.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'll speak more about the Arab and Muslim world and foreign policy and the US. One of the most intimidating aspects of modern US relations with Arab and Muslim majority countries is the US insistent demand that all Arab and Muslim majority countries must normalize relations with the State of Israel as a reward for Israel's ongoing genocide against the Palestinian people. These demands have increased since last February after the US and Israel launched their war of aggression against Iran. The insistence by the US on the long sought after Saudi normalization continues unabated, as does its pressure on Qatar, Iraq, Libya, Tunisia, Syria, and Indonesia, among many others, to follow suit. More recently, the US has succeeded in bringing to power a new Lebanese government that has gone as far as supporting Israel in occupying Lebanese territory when it signed an agreement last month recognizing the sovereignty of the genocidal state. But even before Israel began its genocide, Arab regimes' recognition of Israel has been fraught with the question of Israel's borders. Which Israel and which borders are these Arab and Muslim majority countries required to recognize? Which borders of Israel did Egypt and Jordan, let alone the Palestine Liberation Organization, recognize when they normalized relations in 1978-79 and in 1993-94, respectively? What about the Arab countries which signed the Abraham Accords in 2020 and 2021? These are essential geopolitical questions when one is dealing with a settler colonial superpower demanding that other decolonized countries and colonized peoples recognize and normalize with its settler colonial proxy state in the Middle East. The very essence of European settler colonial states since their inception has been the continuous theft of indigenous territory and extending their borders. From the United States to South Africa, Canada to Australia and New Zealand to Israel, the hunger of settler colonies for more territory and for extending borders is a major feature of their policies. Settler colonies often proffer arguments of national security to explain their insatiable hunger for territory, backed by racially supremacist ideological justifications. Since its emergence in Palestine during the Crusades, European settler colonialism possessed the intrinsic ambition of expanding its territories and borders. Differing crusader knights carved up several kingdoms and principalities in Palestine and its vicinity, whose borders remained in flux due to invasions and indigenous counterattacks for more than 2 centuries. As the Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem, among others, was an inspiration to later European settler colonialism in the Americas, the same obsession with expanding territory and borders would mark white settler colonialism 3 centuries later in North and South America as well, before and after the independence of the European settlers from their mother countries. Indeed, US history and geography since independence through the present are nothing if not about territorial expansion and changing borders. The basic justification of white European settler colonialism was always a mix of racial and religious supremacy. In the US, historian Nick Estes notes that the 1823 Supreme Court decision, Johnson versus McIntosh, established the rights of the white supremacist US to indigenous lands. These alleged rights were based on the doctrine of native occupancy, or native occupancy rights, meaning that their lands could be stolen by those who discovered them, or the doctrine of discovery. This idea stemmed from the 15th century papal bull known as the doctrine of Christian discovery, distinguishing Christian from non-Christian nations. Thus, stealing indigenous land was not considered theft, as under this doctrine, they did not own it to begin with. This founding myth, the historian Estes concludes, eventually became known as manifest destiny, which considered white Anglo-Saxon Americans as a chosen people and justified the conquest of Texas, northern Mexico, and British colonies in the Northwest. Between 1784 and the 1880s, the US annexed more than 2 billion acres of indigenous land. All of this was rooted in the Christian idea of Anglo-Saxon uniqueness, a racialized term applied to all white colonists and their descendants, believed to descend from Teutonic tribes. Their supposed white superiority was seen as a justification of territorial expansion and subjugation of inferior races, forming the core of the popularized mid-19th century project of manifest destiny. In addition to purchasing stolen lands from other European colonial countries, including the Louisiana Purchase in 1803, the Florida Purchase of 1819, the Alaska Purchase of 1867, and the Virgin Islands Purchase of 1917, the US launched wars of territorial acquisition, including invading Mexico, or northern Mexico in 1848, Spanish-held Cuba, Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines in 1898, and took over Hawaii's and what became American Samoa soon after. The US annexed all these territories except for Cuba. The independence of the Philippines in 1946 changed US borders yet again by contracting them for the first and only time by ceding annexed territory. Strange as it may seem, the US, as one scholar put it, has tried to hide its empire territorially by propagating a popular and official map of the country that for decades included and often still includes no more than the continental US, erasing the hundreds of small and big islands and territories it had occupied and annexed over the centuries. President Donald Trump's current quest to annex Canada, Greenland, and Venezuela continues the same tradition of expanding US territories and borders. But the US settler colonial quest to push its borders outward is not unique. Other settler colonies have had a similar, if less illustrious, history. South Africa, for example, whose borders were determined by British gerrymandering for the benefit of colonial settlement in 1910, expanded in 1915 to include Namibia, effectively incorporating it into the country's broader geopolitical map, and which it held until 1990, while holding on to Namibia's strategic Walvis Bay until the fall of apartheid in 1994. The basis of expansionist South Africa, you guessed it, was also white racial and Protestant supremacy. The settler colony of New Zealand, in turn, expanded its territory during the early to mid-20th century into the Pacific as it took over the governance of several adjacent islands, including the Cook Islands, Niue, and Western Samoa, the latter especially, which it subjected to cruel racist rule until 1962. The short period of Nazi Germany's settler colonialism also expanded the territory of the Third Reich and pushed its borders much farther east, more than tripling its original area. Like US territorial thefts, the Third Reich's basis for expansion was also white Christian supremacy and Teutonic heritage. The Nazi principle of Lebensraum, or living space, was inspired, in fact, by the white American settlers' manifest destiny. The Third Reich expanded to include Austria, the Sudetenland in 1938, In 1939, it incorporated Lithuania's Memel territory and all of Bohemia and Moravia. Western and northern Poland were annexed, as well as Luxembourg and France's Alsace-Lorraine regions in 1940. Yugoslavia's Carinthia and Carniola and Lower Styria were also annexed. The annexed territories more than doubled Germany's pre-war territory from 470 to over 1 million square kilometers, from 470,000 to over 1 million square kilometers, and more than tripled its territory once we add the territories that Germany occupied but did not annex. Now, as for the settler colony of Israel, it has always been more explicit about its hunger and avarice for more land thefts, which it justified with European Jewish supremacy and later pan-Jewish supremacy. Since its establishment through ethnic cleansing and terrorism, the fledgling European Jewish settler colony has refused to declare official borders for its state. Indeed, once the Zionist conquest of Palestine began on 30th November 1947, the leader of the Jewish settlers, David Ben-Gurion, insisted that the Zionist militia, quote unquote, should not limit itself to the designated borders specified by the United Partitions Plan issued the day before, on the 29th of November 1947, with pressure from the US, of course, and which granted the Jewish colonists, constituting 30% of the population of Palestine, 55% of the territory. Ben-Gurion insisted that Israel's borders should go beyond those boundaries specified by the partition plan. Quote, when the time came to declare independence, no mention should be made of borders, unquote. Indeed, Ben-Gurion engineered a vote of the 13-member Zionist People's Administration, a sort of proto-cabinet of the settlers, in which 5 members voted against the 4 others attending the meeting to exclude any mention of borders in the so-called Declaration of the Establishment of the Jewish State, issued on 14th May 1948. When objections were raised, Ben-Gurion, inspired by the American settlers' precedent, countered, and I quote him, "This is a declaration of independence. For example, there is the American Declaration of Independence. It includes no mention of territorial definitions," unquote. Ben-Gurion was, of course, correct, and his comparison with the US most apt. Soon after, the UN recognized Israel in May 1949, stipulating that Israel must abide by the borders set by the United Nations General Assembly Partition Plan and by UN General Assembly Resolution 194, which demanded Israel allow the Palestinian refugees it expelled to return home. Israel refused. Israeli Prime Minister Ben-Gurion went further by unilaterally annexing West Jerusalem, slated to be under UN jurisdiction, on the 5th of December 1949, and declared that Israel was no longer bound by the boundaries of the UN partition plan, as the latter pertained both to the Palestinian territories it had conquered and to the UN control of West Jerusalem. Indeed, Israel considered the territories it conquered beyond the stipulated partition plan borders as part of Israel, even though the only international document that granted Israel any form of legitimacy was the non-binding partition plan, which specified its boundaries. This is why, despite increasing pressure from the US, Britain was adamant not to recognize Israel, arguing that it would only do so after the frontiers of the state shall be clearly defined. Here, Ben-Gurion's faith in the US precedent, to which he compared his fledgling settler colony, would prove prescient. The US representative at the UN rose to the occasion and argued against the British that when his country gained independence in 1776, and I quote him, "the land had not even been fully explored, and that no one knew where American claims ended and where European states' claims began," unquote. Israel would expand several times since. Between 1948 and 1967, it took over and annexed the demilitarized zone on the Syrian border. In 1956, it colluded with the French and the British and invaded and occupied Gaza and the Egyptian Sinai and refused to withdraw. When the Eisenhower administration insisted that the Israelis withdraw, Ben-Gurion expressed outrage. I quote him, "Up to the middle of the 6th century, Jewish independence was maintained on the island of Yotvat, south of the Gulf of Eilat, which was liberated yesterday by the Israeli army. Israel considers the Gaza Strip an integral part of the nation. No force, whatever it is called, was going to make Israel evacuate Sinai. And the words of Isaiah the prophet were fulfilled," unquote. But this time, Ben-Gurion was wrong, as the US was furious that its little proxy settler colony collaborated with Britain and France, and as a result suspended aid to Israel and applied pressure at the UN, spearheaded at the time by the Soviets, which forced the young settler colony to withdraw, but only temporarily. Israel would invade both territories again in 1967, along with the entire West Bank and the Golan Heights of Syria, tripling its territorial gains. It annexed East Jerusalem and the Golan Heights in 1980 and 1981 respectively, and has all but annexed the West Bank since. It did withdraw from Sinai without allowing the Egyptians to exercise full sovereignty until the present, while maintaining its occupation of Gaza without respite until it launched its ongoing genocide in October 2023. Israel also went into Lebanon in 1978 and 1982, expanding its territory further until it was forced to withdraw by the Lebanese resistance in the year 2000. Finally, Israel has gone back into Lebanon since October 2024 and now occupies about 2,000 square kilometers of the country with the agreement of the US-installed Lebanese government, which is now officially collaborating with Israel and seeks to disarm the very resistance movement that ended the last Israeli occupation. The agreement that the Lebanese government signed last month with Israel recognizes Israeli sovereignty, presumably over all the territories Israel claims for itself. There were no caveats about borders. In the meantime, Israel has occupied wide swaths of land in south and southwestern Syria since 2024, amounting to more than 600 square kilometers, with plans for the establishment of Jewish settlements ongoing, with the tacit agreement of the post-Assad regime in Syria, which issued no more than muted calls on Israel to withdraw while conducting direct negotiations with the genocidal state. The new Syrian president, buoyed by his infatuation with Trump, declared last week, and I quote, "As long as Israel refuses to withdraw, why should we sign an agreement with it? It remains, of course," unquote, "it remains unclear whether his demand encompasses the demilitarized zone that Israel annexed as a condition for normalization. In other words, it is unknown if he, the president of Syria, like the other Arab states that have normalized relations, is signaling a willingness to normalize based on Israeli borders that include all other occupied and annexed territories, with the exception of most Syrian lands. Based on the above, it seems that Arab and Muslim majority countries are called upon to recognize, or what they are called upon to recognize, is an Israel with whichever borders its Jewish colonists decide they need. The Israeli territory whose borders were delineated by the 1947 partition plan, or the territories that Israel conquered between the 30th of November 1947 and January of 1949, when it signed armistice agreements with neighboring Arab states. Israel's annexation of West Jerusalem, perhaps, is also included, which was annexed in December 49. All of these have become non-negotiable territories and borders, as has the entire DMZ, a territory with Syria, which Israel occupied against international law. While for a few decades Israel pretended that the post-1967 borders were negotiable, its annexation of East Jerusalem and the Golan Heights took them off the table. The insistence of Israel's leaders in the last 2 decades on never giving up the West Bank has also taken out the West Bank from the category of negotiable territory and borders. The question now that Israel is claiming to negotiate with Lebanon, which the US has instructed to normalize with Israel, concerns the 2,000 square kilometers that Israel has occupied and expanded since October 2024, provided the US-installed Lebanese government dismantle the anti-Israeli occupation resistance movement before the occupation ends, assuming it ever will. It remains unclear if the additional 600 square kilometers of Syrian territory, which Israel has occupied since 2024, are negotiable at all. When Egypt's Anwar Sadat signed the peace treaty with Israel in 1979, his regime recognized Israel's post-1967 expanded borders, except for the Sinai, as the treaty recognized the established international border between Israel and Egypt as that of the 1906 border between Egypt and Ottoman Palestine, separating both countries, and I quote the agreement, without prejudice to the issue of the status of the Gaza Strip. This was so even when the international status of the Strip was then, as it remains today, one of an illegally occupied territory. In 1994, the Jordanians followed suit in their peace treaty with Israel, whose international borders they recognized as those of the 1922 so-called British Transjordan Memorandum, which established borders between Transjordan and Palestine, then under British mandatory rule, as, quote, the permanent, secure, recognized international boundary between them, but also, and I quote, without prejudice to the status of any territories that came under Israeli military government control in 1967. Essentially, both Egypt and Jordan recognized the illegal Israeli occupation of the territories designated by the 1947 partition plan as part of the Palestinian state, as well as the illegal 1949 Israeli annexation of West Jerusalem. That neither country referred to the occupied DMZ on the Syrian border, let alone the Golan Heights, amounted to no less than tacit recognition of their annexation. In the case of the PLO, the Oslo Agreement with Israel did not recognize any borders, even if the PLO recognized Israel's so-called right to exist in peace and security, relegating the issue of borders to what was then termed the permanent status negotiations, which, as many of you know, never materialized. Still, it remains unclear which borders of Israel the PLO recognized as those within which Israel has a right to exist. Unlike Egypt and Jordan, whose peace treaties they referenced, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Morocco, and Sudan were able to avoid the issue of borders completely when they signed the so-called Abraham Accords in 2020 and 2021 to normalize with Israel, since none of them shares borders with Israel. Today, Arab countries and Muslim majority countries must be clear that if they decide to recognize the genocidal settler colony of Israel, they are doing so to reward it for the genocide it continues to inflict on the Palestinians with more stolen Arab territory. Indeed, Benjamin Netanyahu was clear in 2025 that Israel's Jewish colonists and his regime still covet are the lands of neighboring Jordan, Egypt, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, as well as Syria and Lebanon. They're clear on this, a vision which elicited condemnation by the very same Arab and Muslim majority countries the US continues to pressure to normalize with Israel as a reward for its ongoing genocide. As every territorial expansion which Israel brought about and all the new borders it delineated, except for Sinai, have become irreversible as time passed, although, of course, a member of the cabinet of Netanyahu has called on the government to recolonize Sinai last year, these new territories, too, will soon become permanent parts of Israel. Given this record, one wonders if there will remain any Arab states in the region needed to recognize Israel after it annexes their own territories inside its ever-expanding borders. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Joseph MASSAD. As we can see, I mean, the issue of borders is still unresolved, be it in Palestine, but also in other parts of the Muslim world today. We have our next speaker, Dr. Muhammad AKRAM NADWI, who's the principal and founder of As-Salam Institute. Dr. AKRAM is actually also a noted scholar of Islam. He will give us his points on governance in the Muslim world and how do we develop accountability in many of the Muslim countries, and also issues of corruption and other problems as well. Yeah.
الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فما أوتيتم من شيء فمتاع الحياة الدنيا وما عند الله خير وأبقى للذين آمنوا وعلى ربهم يتوكلون والذين يجتنبون كبائر الإثم والفواحش وإذا ما غضبوا هم يغفرون والذين استجابوا لربهم وأقاموا الصلاة وأمرهم شورى بينهم ومما رزقناهم ينفقون والذين إذا أصابهم البغي هم ينتصرون وبعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. I already wrote a piece on the governance in Islam, or good governance. I hope, inshallah, that you must have received it, and many of you have read that piece. Before I start, a little bit different from what I wrote, I would like to recite a poetic verse by the great Indian poet Iqbal, Allama Iqbal. He said in his poetry, कर सकते थे जो अपने ज़माने की इमामत वो कोहना दिमाग अपने ज़माने के हैं पैरों. Those people who would have been leaders of their time because of their old mindset, because they don't think, they have become followers of their time. It is complaining that Muslims, if they would have used their thinking power, they could have been leaders of their time. But they don't think and they don't understand their own text and they don't understand the context in which they live. That's why they have become followers of their time. So this actually is very important to understand. What we need to think is, what is good governance in the guidance provided by our Lord, and how we can implement in the context in which we live. Certainly, no doubt, when you look in the Quran, good governance does not mean to have lofty buildings, palaces. It does not mean that we have great military. It does not mean that we have amazing economic power. Rather than that, in the Quran, good governance has 4 pillars. One of them is al-adl, the justice. Second is al-amana, the trust. And the third one is al-ihtisab, the accountability. And the 4th pillar is shura, how to consult everybody and not to impose your own views on other people. These are the 4 pillars that Quran has mentioned, and the Prophet ﷺ has emphasized about the good governance in this world. But the truth really is, something has been wrong in the Muslim world for a long, long time. I'm going to give you 2 examples. One example is from India, and one is from the early Umayyad period. The example of India is from the Mughal Empire. In India, there have been many Muslim dynasties. Last of them is Mughal Empire. Mughals in India, they had great rulers. Among them, 6 people are famous: Babar, Humayun, Akbar, Jahangir, Shah Jahan, and Aurangzeb. These are 6 great Mughal rulers. The third of them is Akbar. Akbar's time is amazing time in India. He ruled India nearly 50 years. That was the beginning of the 2nd millennium of Hijrah. If you look at the buildings that he built, amazing. If you look his military power, that's also amazing. He has been conquering. And also economically, Mughals were very strong in the time of Akbar. So from all these 3 aspects, buildings, military, and economic power, Akbar's reign is the greatest reign in India, one of the greatest reign in India. And people all over the world, they always praise Akbar for these things. But when you look at what he has been doing in the kingdom, how did he implement these pillars, we found a contradiction. In his time, the ministers that Akbar has got, they are clever people, very clever. One of them is Faidi, Abul Fayed Faidi. He was so knowledgeable that he wrote tafsir of the Quran, commentary of the Quran in Arabic language, only using those words which don't have any dot. Arabic words, Arabic letters, most of them have dots. Ba, ta, sa, jim, kha, zal, all of them have got dots. Very few letters don't have dot. He wrote tafsir using only those words which have no dotted letter. And his name tafsir Sawati'ul Ilham. So even the name has no dotted letter. His ministers are amazing people, but what he did, somehow he got the idea, it is new millennium, starting of new 1,000 years in Islam. We don't need the religion, we need a new religion. He banned the name Muhammad. He was against Adhan and imposed many, many things which actually were against Islam. And his people who he chose, if you look in their life, you can see really how Islam has become weak in the time of Akbar. His Shaykhul Islam was Mullah Abdullah Sultanpuri, Shaykhul Islam of India in the time of Akbar. Mullah Abdullah Sultanpuri, very rich person, huge money, gold, silver, everything. When the time for the zakat will come, before the end of the year, he would give all his wealth to his wife as a gift. So then he cannot pay zakat. And she, next year, before the end of the year, she would give back all the wealth to her husband. So she does not pay zakat. So they never paid zakat. This is how they have been ruling India, making effort not to implement Islam as the Quran has mentioned. In the other hand, if you look in the early Umayyad Caliphate, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz rahimahullah ta'ala, one of the great caliph, he was appointed the Khalifa in the 99 years of Hijrah, and he remained in the Khilafah only 2 years and few months. There was corruption before him. When he came to Khilafah, he corrected everything. He returned back all the money and all the wealth taken by the people, by the Khulafa before him. He returned them back to the treasury. And he did not spend anything on himself. He did not spend anything on his family. And his rule was from Spain to India and China, the biggest empire in his time. But this person himself was a poor person, did not have enough to eat, did not have enough to feed his children. With great honesty, great justice, he ruled Muslim world. And that because of his behavior, and because of his justice, and because of his amana, many, many people living in his kingdom, many Christians and many Jews, they converted to Islam. And his governors, they wrote him back that because of your justice and because of what you do, people are converting to Islam. We don't have enough money in our treasury, from the tax. Because when people become Muslim, they don't pay any tax. So he wrote back to those people, Inna Allah Ta'ala ba'atha an-nabiyya Muhammadan sallallahu alayhi wa sallam hadiyan walam yab'athu jabiya. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has appointed the Prophet Muhammad as a guide. He came to guide people. He came to improve people's condition. He did not come as collector of the taxes. He did not come to collect the taxes. This how was the difference So you see in Mughal Empire, Shaykhul Islam collecting money, collecting gold, and even he does not pay zakat. And you see Umar ibn Abdul Aziz rahimahullah ta'ala does not spend any money on him. And whatever money was owned by his family, he returned back to the treasury. This example of Umar, that exactly is what Quran has been emphasizing that about the good governance. That when people govern, they look into the interest of the people they're governing. They don't look in the interest of themselves. They don't look in the interest of the people they belong to. Rather than they look in the interest of all the people they rule. That's what exactly means shura in the Quran. Very often people misuse the word shura and they think it is something, it means exactly what democracy means. If you look in the Quran and the verses that I have read, it makes very clear shura is not how to elect a government. That could be inherited. A sultan could be a king could be ruler. Somebody elected democratically, a prime minister could be ruler. It doesn't matter how you elect your government. Quran does not specify that how people elect their representative. But what Quran emphasizes, the people who rule their people, they must make effort that when they implement any law, they must consult. And when they consult, it must be in the interest of the people they rule. That's what Quran says, الَّذِينَ اسْتَجَابُوا لِلَّهِ وَأَقَامُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَى بَيْنَهُمْ. These people, they listen to their Lord and they obey His command. They establish the prayer. And whenever they implement anything on their society, they consult each other. Consulting does not mean really that you bring an idea that a majority says, not necessarily. Sometimes could be possible that you differ from everybody. The Prophet ﷺ, when he wanted to leave for the battle of Uhud, his intention was to stay in Medina and not to leave Medina. But when he consulted people, most people said, no, we must leave Medina, go out and fight. The Prophet ﷺ accepted the pressure and he left Medina, and we know really what happened. The result was that the Prophet ﷺ and his followers, they were defeated and nearly 70 people of his companions have been killed. So that was, something Quran has mentioned in detail. But on the other hand, when Abu Bakr Siddiq became Khalifa, he wanted to wage war against the people who refused to pay zakat. And when he consulted people, everybody advised him that don't fight these people. Even when he asked Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, the second caliph, he asked him, Umar said, no, we don't need to fight anybody. We are in danger, remain in Medina. Though Abu Bakr consulted everybody, but he did not listen to the advice of the people, to consult other people. Rather than he preferred to take his army and fight all those people. Later on, people realized really what Abu Bakr had decided, that was the wisdom. The Quranic shura is that when people implement Islamic law, when they implement how to lead the people, they must consult everybody, and at the end of the day, they follow the opinion which is the most in the interest of the people they rule. There should be no group which can put pressure. Like in our time, we have got many lobbying groups. That's why in democracy, most time people have no idea who has got the power. People think that, you elect a government, you elect your representative, and they have got the power. But most often, the power lies somewhere else. The people who represent you, they can't use their power in your interest. Islamic way, the teaching of the Quran is that the people who represent the people, they must make effort to use their power and to use their authority for the interest of the people they rule, not for any hidden interest, not for any hidden agenda. If they can't do that, then it means they are not qualified to rule their people. They're cheating and they're deceiving. That's what Quran keeps calling that, a khiyana. Khiyana is the word opposite of the amana. These people cannot carry the amana, they cannot carry the trust, rather than they cheat their people and they deceive their people. So it is one of the important pillars in Islam that whenever rulers and the people who are in the governance, they make any decision, the decision must be in the interest of the people they rule. If somewhere their decision is not in the interest of the people, then basically it means automatically this government is disqualified. In the history of Islam, when you look, very often we keep saying people like Akbar in Mughal Empire, in Umayyad Empire, in Abbasid Empire, in Ottoman Empire, and also in our time, there are many, many states. If you look there, very often they keep failing to fulfill the interests of their own people. The agenda that they are following not necessarily going to help their own people and the religion that they follow. So this is one of the important pillars, though actually Islam, I mentioned, there are 4 pillars, but one of the important things is the shura. The shura means consult everybody, and that at the end of the day, then look in the interest of the people. And this shura, it must be in the obedience of the command given by Allah. Because Quran said, الَّذِينَ اسْتَجَابُوا لِلَّهِ وَأَقَامُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَى بَيْنَهُمْ. Those people who listen to the command of their Lord, they establish the prayer, and when they make any collective decision, that decision must be done by consulting each other, and that must be in the interest of the people they rule. That what was the main thing in the life of the Prophet ﷺ, in the life of Abu Bakr Siddiq, Umar al-Faruq, Uthman, and Ali. These 4 chosen caliphs, and that what Quran keeps mentioning about the prophets and messengers who have been before the Prophet ﷺ, like Dawud alayhi salam, Sulaiman alayhi salam, and Dhul Qarnayn. These people, they got the power, they got the money, they got the resources, but money, power, and resources did not make them corrupt.
Sheikh,
There was no corruption.
I'm really sorry. We are running out of time. Would it be possible for you to wrap up for the next speaker to speak?
Okay. Just last bit.
Yes.
And at the moment, what just we want to advise people is really, not necessarily we can have an ideal governance, but at least what we want actually for our Muslim states and Muslim rulers is at least minimum don't have any corruption. Make effort not to have corruption when you rule your people. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Waalaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Very insightful by Dr. AKRAM NADWI, and I think very frank about what's happening in the Muslim world now. So we move in now with Professor Dato RAHMAT MOHAMMAD, who's going to give us a more global perspective on governance. And I think maybe he will touch also on the issue of corruption, on the issue of injustice, and more importantly, as Sheikh was mentioning just now, how lobby groups and interest groups are now taking over and, in a sense, causing a lot of mismanagement in Muslim countries. Dr. Rahmat, thank you.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. A very good morning, distinguished guests and distinguished and eminent speakers. At the outset, I would like to express my gratitude to the organizer, USAS, for having invited me to speak on this very important subject, good governance and political stability. And that I must congratulate the work of this university in inviting the world leaders, the world eminent scholars to come and discuss on a very important issues and coming up with solutions, and I think this is something that we like to see is happening in this part of the world. And before I proceed to with my point, I would like to just mention briefly the work that I've done apart from my academic life. I was away for 8 years. It is a long sabbatical leave. I always crave for sabbatical leave in university. I couldn't because holding administrative position until 2008, that chance was given to me, but it was a very long sabbatical leave, 8 years serving an intergovernmental organization stationed in New Delhi from 2008 to 2016 as the Secretary General of the Asian African Legal Consultative Organization of 47 countries of Asia and Africa. The idea is to promote progressive development of international law. It is a tangible outcome of the famous Bandung Conference of 1955 through the wisdom and leadership of the great leaders in the light of President Sukarno, Gamal Nasser of Egypt, and some African leaders. They convened in Bandung and established this very important Bandung Conference so that they have a different perspective of what is international law as compared to the European Westphalia international law and the American international law. So my current work, I deal with, I work with non-governmental organization. Again, in the area of international law, we recently visited and met our international lawyers in Beirut, in Lebanon, and in Tripoli, and also in Istanbul to come up with solutions and some issues that pertain to Palestine and how we can assist, how can we help the Palestinians to finally get their justice. And we also work for the government of Malaysia. We become part of the delegation in the ICJ advisory opinion on illegal occupation in 2024. We became amicus curiae, friend of the court in ICC to establish Palestine as a state under international law, and also to submit documents, evidence, and confession of victims of Palestinian against the perpetrator of crime, the Israelis. So this is what we did recently. Now let's talk about good governance, and I would like to look at good governance in the perspective of international order. You know, we have domestically, we were somehow, forced, states domestically forced to comply with good governance because it is part of democracy. We talk about transparency, we talk about rule of law, we talk about accountability, we talk about effective institutions, the courts, parliament, and also responsible leadership. Honorable Speaker mentioned about, how do we create that responsible leadership. This is very important, and this is part of good governance. And if you have good governance, then obviously there will be stability in politics. So now that being said, what about international order? Now I have this question to ask, that first, can we expect states to practice good governance domestically if international system itself is not governed according to principle of fairness, accountability, and rule of law? The second question is that can we expect states to respect international law when international law appears to be very selective? only applies to certain countries. They would apply international law as they like. This is selective international law. So can we expect respect for international law if that is being practiced? And third, can we preserve our faith as nation in multilateralism when institutions struggle? Institutions like United Nations struggle to respond effectively to the most serious crisis in the world. So these questions are not academic. They are very important. They go to the heart of credibility and legitimacy of international order. So yesterday, the speakers, the scholars rightly said that there's nothing wrong with international law, although I have my reservation on the Western-centric of international law, the Westphalian international law. There should be immense or great participation from third world countries, but that happened. But eventually they are dominated by basically the superpowers. But what is important is the rules are there, it exists. But what is happening is the gap between the rules that exist, the international law, and the political will, and the institutional capacity to implement, and of course the issue of accountability. And they should implement it consistently. And this is not happening since the establishment of the United Nations in 1945, really. And therefore, if we are talking about the future of international order, it therefore depends on our ability to build a system in which power is accountable and institution must be well represented, and there must be respect for international law. Now, good governance at the international level is complex. We always assume that, why is it that, for example, there is no enforcement? This is very important. And as an international lawyer, lecturer, we struggle to explain to our students, because when they ask good questions like, why is it international law is not enforceable, or things are not happening according to what is being said in international law? So what we mean here is international law unenforceable? We have the highest court in the world, the International Court of Justice, making advisory opinion, which is not binding among states. The ICC, unfortunately, is crippled because of selective, one, prosecution, and secondly, to get the perpetrator of crime is almost impossible. So what is happening in this very important judicial system? So is it not impossible? What about the fact that if we talk about world governance, what does it mean by global governance? Is that happening? Are we saying that United Nations is an embodiment of that global governance? So unfortunately, international order is very complex. If you talk about multilateralism, legal order, of course, we always refer to United Nations and its other agencies, including the ICJ. But it is not like that, because the system operates in the form of, number one, state sovereignty. Every state has the right under international law. They are the actors of international law. Number two, we are talking about unfortunately, consensus. It has to be consented. Things must be done through resolutions in the General Assembly, even worse in the United Nations Security Council. And third is the promotion of state cooperation. This is something that is, we expect the highest level of the government would be able to enforce, would be able to implement whatever has been said under international law, but it is not like that, because for ICC, for example, ICC do not have the power to enforce and to punish, yes, the individual, but most of the time they would require state cooperation. This has been said, this has been reminded, this has been decided by ICJ in the latest decision of illegal occupation of Israel in the occupied Palestinian territory, that what is needed now is state must now go to United Nations General Assembly and enforce what has been said or been decided by the court. For example, complicity, that you do not cooperate with Israelis' friend in terms of business, in terms of economic. But this is not happening in the UN General Assembly, unfortunately. This is the thing that has been said many times by ICJ, but unfortunately is not being, being implemented, is being discussed, perhaps a few countries. So global governance is not an illusion, but that is how it is, how the world operates, and these are something that we have to accept since 1945, unless there is a total reformation of international or multilateralism. So the very core of good governance and international order is, of course, the law, and also the point on accountability, the transparency, participation, fairness, which I must say is compatible to what Sheikh Muhammad said, the Islamic principle or the Islamic principle of good governance is compatible. It is possible to run both principles, actually. And the government, therefore, is given the responsibility and accountable to whatever they do in this world. There is always check and balance. But of course, it will depend very much on the state, finally. The state, finally. And the most important good governance and international order, I must say, is rule of law. And it based on what we call equality of states. This is an old doctrine. It's an old Westphalian doctrine, which is more than 300 years. It started with equality of states. They are the same, small, big, economically weak or strong. There is this equality of state. And it is because of this doctrine that after the formation of United Nations in 1945, all the newly independent states agree to submit, to work with United Nations, because they believe that even if they are a small state, even if they are an island, they can work with United Nations and believe that they are given equal treatment. Well, I mean, you will see that that is not happening until today. And that, apart from that, there is this United Nations Charter, the treaties and convention and international customary law. These are all the sources, of very important sources that, as I said, as an embodiment of laws, rule of law in international order. And this is very important. And the second point, what I want to say is accountability and ending of impunity. Very important, especially what is happening now. We spoke about accountability and ending impunity. State is accountable, and that there is no such thing as immunity or impunity to leaders if they are perpetrator of big crimes, crime against humanity, war crimes, aggression, and genocide. It's very important. It's the pillar of, actually the pillar of the whole thing. The structure of global governance is that. And this has been said again and again. You have to work on the accountability of the mechanism. What is the accountability mechanism? Is the ICJ, the ICC. These are very important mechanisms. And unfortunately, as I said earlier, they depend on state cooperation. And why is that we are always stuck with the P5 of the UN Security Council? This is by design. You must, if you have time, go and do your homework, check what we call the travaux préparatoires. This is the preparation, the genesis, how, for example, P5, the members, the permanent members of Security Council was established. There was actually a compromise between small state and superpowers at that time, the victory or the victorious state after the Second World War, that if they want to be part of the United Nations, they must have that control, especially the veto power. And this is not something that I create. It is there in the preparation of these important documents. And it has been accepted. Because they say, if we are not in, then expect failure like the League of Nations after World War I. So because of that, because of this, there is a compromise that P5 was there, and they actually, unfortunately, exercised that Article 27, the veto power that exists until today. And we talk about accountability and ending impunity. Unfortunately, these big countries are not members of the Rome Statute of ICC. We talk about United States, we talk about China, we talk about Russia, we talk about India. They are not members of ICC, unfortunately. So where is that international law which applies to every country? Unfortunately, it is not like that. The world is as such that we have these countries, and because of the history of the formation of United Nations. So there is this gap between the legal obligation and political enforcement. As I said, political enforcement would mean that it is a selective, selectively chosen by this country, which they like and which they do not. Unfortunately, that happened. Now, because of this position, there is a reformation of global institution or institution legitimacy. Countries talk about how do we go about reforming the United Nations Security Council, which again is part of the global governance or the good governance. And there is also, I have to rush here, there is also the need to look at the importance of Global South, because the current position of United States and Europe is uncertain. There is a need to look back at the importance of the Global South, or NAM, or referring to the Bandung spirit again. And it is after all created for the developing countries. Now, as far as the Muslim world is concerned, now unfortunately, the OIC has, which has been said yesterday, not actually not something that is expected to achieve its objective. But I have a different view, contrary to what many believe, that nothing can be done in the OIC. But I think we still have hope that we can work out among the Muslim world. Of course, they work in aggregate. All Muslim countries or Muslim majority countries agreed to do something for Palestine. But the only problem is the strategic move among Muslim countries, because among them they have differences, and there is, of course, diverse practice of the governance, and because of that, it is, I think, by design that it is supposed to be like that there is no consensus achieved among Muslim countries to do something that they are supposed to do for Palestine, for example. Maybe you can debate or dispute on that issue. So finally, the way forward, Prof. Khairuddin, I would see that governance and international order should be built around at least 6 principles. First is equality before international law. No state is above the law. Second is accountability, strong accountability. A serious violation of serious international crime should have consequences. There is no such thing as impunity given to the leaders or individual. Third, we are talking about institutional reform here. I mean, this is very important. This has been said for years, but we want to see some movement, positive movement. And fourth, we are talking about inclusiveness. The Global South must have a strong voice. Out of 193 members of the United Nations, majority are from developing world and least developed nation. But why is it they're not given that opportunity to voice their concern? They do, but unfortunately, it is only a few that finally decide on the movement or the direction of the world. And the fifth is respect for sovereignty. This is very important, although it is an old Westphalian doctrine of state sovereignty, but still it is important. And 6 is effective multilateralism, where state must cooperate among them and solve problems, and the international law must be respected. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. Rahmat. We're so sorry that we cannot give enough time for all of the speakers. I think if I were to give 2 hours each, they can go on and on, but we need to give some time for the audiences as well. We have time for about 4 or 5 questions, so maybe I can open up to everybody. The mics are there. Anyone has any question to ask any of our speakers, you may come forward.
As-Salamu alaikum and good morning. My name is Kalina Khalili. I wear many hats, so let me explain briefly. I'm a senior editor of Islamika magazine, which has been around since 2005 from the UK, but we are relaunching on the 27th this month. I'll be going around to introduce myself later. But I'd like to offer an insight about an external factor that a lot of conference seems to be...
So sorry, we don't have much time. Can
yes,
you just ask the question?
A question.
Is that okay? Yeah, thank
All
you.
right.
Yeah.
In question form. Okay, how do we take into account some social aspect that is called birth gap? It was mentioned yesterday in the economic session, and I think it also belongs in the governance section, because we have problem with the low rate of population coming up in maybe 100 years or 50 years, that everything that we've been talking about, the framework that we have right now, is going to be a totally different framework. And I see that this issue between gender issue is not being addressed, when it is actually very important. And we have the women movement that has changed the labor force. It was viewed as a problem for quite some time, and then the commercialization of it became a success story for the economy of the world. But today we have a problem with the women who are not willing to get married. And we have an issue of manosphere. And this is something that may seem like a personal relationship between men and women, but it's actually something that I think we should talk about. And as a teacher of Islamic studies, I do deal with this, and I see firsthand how the women are saying that at this time, many of them do not want to talk about marriage. So perhaps this, my question is, can we consider this as an important external factor in the global conversation? Thank you.
All right. Women not wanting to get married in the Muslim world. I think it's a global trend. I'm not going to answer that question. Maybe Sheikh Akram, you want to?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So this actually is question is very important, and I have been asked this question many, many times. You know, the important thing really is that men and women both need to understand the importance of institution of the marriage in Islam. The problem really is that very often women are scared. They realize really once they got married, they can't have their future career. They also feel that they will have some pressure from their husband or the husband's family. So there is a fear in the mind of the women about the marriage. What we need to do is to educate the men. They understand the respect of the women and they love the women. So I have been doing research so much about the women. I realize the real problem in Muslim world is that Muslim men generally don't have a proper respect for the women. They always think women are inferior. They are meant to be just looking after the house, cooking, cleaning. Meaning is their idea of what women mean. They get the knowledge from the society that they have been living. People don't take knowledge about the women from the Quran, from the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, rather than they take from the society. So this is actually, Islam is the only religion. If marriage becomes weaker, then institutional marriage becomes weaker, Islam will become weaker. So it is the worry of all the Muslims. They must make effort to how to bring this institution in action. And the way is to educate the men how to respect the women and what family means, what women mean, and how to give proper space to the women so they can have their future career and they also can actually support the family building. But it is something not necessarily we can make by the law, rather than it needs a proper teaching of the society. Wassalamu alaikum.
Salam wa rahmatullah. It's an interesting point. To refer back to what Joseph was saying just now, I once read a book on Palestine, and the title of the book is Birthing the Nation. It's an amazing anthropological study of women in the Palestinian occupied territories. And in these territories, women resist Israeli occupation by getting married and by getting a lot of children, because they know that their children will die because of the conflict. But merely from statistics alone, in areas where there are more conflicts, people get married. The rates of marriage are higher. So I don't know. How do we square that, Joseph?
Well, actually, the book was written by a colleague of mine. We had gone to school together, Rauda Kanane.
Yes.
And of course, it was important because in the case of Israel, for example, contraceptives are free for Jews and costly, are free for Palestinians and costly for Jews. The idea is to limit the population of the Palestinians and increase the population of Jews, hence sort of the resistance aspect of the birth rate. And also, of course, we see the kind of interesting parallel, even during the first Intifada and subsequently, which as a result of Israeli military actions of using tear gas grenades, for example, in enclosed areas, that led to, in the first Palestinian uprising in the late 80s, about 1,000 miscarriages of children. So as we saw at the time, for example, European and American women's struggle to have the right to end a pregnancy as a feminist quest, in the Palestinian territories, Palestinian women were basically struggling to maintain a pregnancy against the miscarriages that were induced by Israeli military action. So again, the issue of women's control over their bodies differs according to context. So we see the different strategies and different goals based on the kinds of attempts to control women's reproductive capacity.
Very interesting. Any? Yeah. Ambassador. Is there a mic for the ambassador?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
Hold on. There's a question in front here. Can somebody bring the mic to the front? Bring the mic to the front, yeah. Hold on,
Thank you. Thank you for all speakers. I really appreciate all the insights and the illuminative comments from all, but specifically my question is for Professor MASSAD. I'm troubled with the title of the conference, where everyone matters, pride and unity in Islam. And since you've illuminated beautifully the issue of Israel and the genocide and the borders, to what extent do you think that now we are witnessing a paradox in terms of global powers, shifts in global powers, and the demise of the empire, of the American empire, with this sort of entropy and chaos in terms of foreign policy? And people talk about the rise of other empires, China. To what extent do you think that the Arab world and the Muslim Ummah can have something on this rise of superpowers? How can we have we set a new agenda for revival, not to be a witness, but rather to be an actor in the global politics? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. MASSAD is my last name, so that you know. However, what I wanted to say, I think the current situation of war has shown us how limited the sovereignty of many Arab countries is, especially in relation to their allowing the US to actually use their sovereign territory to launch an aggressive war. And they have no control over what US forces based on their sovereign territory can or cannot do. So we see more and more limitation of the sovereign power of Arab states, especially in the Gulf, but elsewhere as well, Jordan more recently as well. I mean, we see also the attempt by other sort of rising powers like China, but also existing powers with limitations like Russia, not fully able or willing at the moment to confront the declining power of the US. While at the same time, of course, in the case of the war with Iran, they are indeed backing directly and indirectly the Iranian side and or observing the immense resistance, anti-imperial resistance that the Iranians have shown since last February. So unless it seems to me, for example, in the Saudi example, clearly the Gulf countries understand very well that the presence of US forces on their territory does not protect them, but rather increases their vulnerability and their insecurity. So, and this is a moment where they can stand up and say, and even sort of collectively say to the US, you cannot endanger our national security and populations to advance a very strange sort of non-strategic war that you have chosen. They can limit that power if they will, and I think the Saudis would be the leaders in that regard, given their larger weight economically and politically in the region. There's no sign that anyone is able to stand up to US diktat, that they continue to actually bow down. We see even the important role of Pakistan and Qatar in relation to the negotiations with Iran remain within the US orbit, really. So in that sense, we have seen less movement by Malaysia and Indonesia, the larger Muslim majority nations in this regard. So unless there's a kind of move to limit this declining but yet persisting US imposition on the sovereignty of these nations, I think very little will change in the near future. There's a lot more that will change later on. But I do think there's an opportunity at the moment for Arab leaders and Muslim majority country leaders to say to the US, you cannot use our territory to advance your strange strategies of war and endanger our national security in the process. Unfortunately, we haven't seen that. So.
Rahman?
Just a small point on where I said we need to utilize OIC to the fullest. I think there is this resolution 377A in the UN General Assembly where it can be used. It is called Uniting for Peace. And I think many times countries are using this in time of conflict. And I think OIC countries should utilize the importance of 377A, and they have indeed used this 377A as a resolution. If there is for example, a problem in the UNSC where countries are not able to make a decision, so they use that to ensure that they have a uniting for peace as I think something that they can move on. And I think this is something that we should work on with OIC countries rather than saying that we have no hope for OIC countries. It needs to be done that way. And you cannot especially use all the 57 Muslim countries to come at once and agree on many things. A collective or aggregate of that we can, but on the action plan is very important that we take a few Muslim countries of OIC that where there is a credibility and integrity.
Yes.
That's more
Thank you very much, Dato'. We don't have time to take any more questions, but because we have invited Tan Sri to be here, and I enjoy listening to him, I'm going to ask him a very difficult question. Given what's happening in Malaysia right now, and all of the wrestling that you have to deal with, how do you think Malaysia can play a big role in shaping the Muslim Ummah in the many decades to come?
Well, that's a very tough question, Frank. Well, first of all, Prof, let me start with this. I'm appealing to all universities. I'm appealing, seriously. We have a lot of professors here. You are a custodian of our future. Yes. You like it or not. Professors, you are our custodian. Please invest on the young. We have no choice at all. So if you want to see the survival of our nation, please invest on that. So this is where I believe university can play a very vital role of educating our children to be good citizen and be good leader. You must create programs so that all students, regardless whatever faculty they come from, to go through these programs, be a good person, be a good leader. Until and unless we do that, then I don't think we will have a position to influence others. No, I've seen enough. I've seen in corporate world, I've seen in commercial world, I've seen as a politician, and I've seen as administrator, lacking of those wisdom. And this is the ingredients to destruction. It doesn't matter whether coming from Muslim country or non-Muslim country. At the end of the day, it's about education. So academia, please look at this thing seriously and invest on the youth. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And with that, let us give a round of applause for our panelists and thank them for a very interesting session. Thank you very much.